Trisha, honey, can you please bring some juice for Mr. Lane?
Miss Nicolene's eyes twinkled as she smiled at me. Mr. Lane, a short, balding, middle-aged man in a worn-out three-piece suit, was sent by the adoption agency and worked on behalf of social services. Sure, Miss Nicolene. I exited the living room and returned shortly with a glass of juice, which I handed to Mr. Lane.
Thank you, dear.
In one gulp, Mr. Lane finished the juice and placed it on the center table in front of him.
So, Mrs. Fraser, as you were telling me about the home improvement project?
Miss Nicoline told Mr. Lane she received the check and she'll be heading to the bank the next day to get the process started. Miss Nicoline wasn't all she was cracked up to be, nor was her husband, Mr. Jack. Don't believe me? Keep watching and you'll see how they made my life a living hell. When Mr. and Mrs. Fraser signed up to be foster parents, one stipulation was made very clear by the agency. They must renovate their home. With leaking occurring throughout the house and floorboards groaning when you walked on them, was deemed hazardous by the agency. However, with the system crammed to capacity, they had no choice but to hand me over to the Frasers. After 30 minutes, Mr. Lane rose from the sofa and shook Miss Nicolene's hand. I watched as the usual sleight of hand between Mr. Lane and Miss Nicoline happened. Yes, Miss Nicoline paid Mr. Lane every visit to buy her more time. His visit was just a protocol of social services. As soon as Mr. Lane drove off, the real Miss Lane emerged. I didn't know if my mind was playing tricks on me, but I swore I saw her eyes turn black and two horns grow from the top of her head, before it vanished just as quickly as it emerged.
Clean this house from top to bottom. It's filthy,
she yelled at me. In a calmer tone, she continued.
Mel, darling, let's go before the mall closes.
Mel, who was 2 years younger than I was, skipped into the room with a bag of chips in her hand. She stopped in front of me and emptied the remaining potato chips and the wrapper onto my shoes and snickered before she stepped in front of her mother. I glared at her, although I held my tongue as Mel and Miss Nicoline left. If the opportunity arose, I'd be out of there in a heartbeat. At least the universe smiled on me and I had my own room. The window opened 1 inch and the floorboards on the side were sunken. The only other place I was able to retreat to when I needed peace was school. At least people at school liked me. And you want to know what the best part was? Mel wasn't there. So at school, I was able to be myself and get a break from all the Frasers.
So, bestie,
Christine said as she fell into step beside me on the way to class.
Are you excited about your 16th birthday this Saturday?
No, I shrugged.
Why not? Your 16th birthday should be a big deal.
None of my birthdays were special. We entered class and Christine sat next to me.
Mom and I plan on changing that. She booked us a full spa day, a massage, manis and pedis, the works.
I don't want to get too excited about this, even though it does sound like fun.
Just ask Mrs. Fraser to go. If she says no, we'll find a way around it.
Like sneak out of the house to go to a midnight movie? Christine laughed.
Nothing that drastic. Although...
Just then, the teacher walked into the class and Christine and I ended our conversation. That night during dinner, I asked Miss Nicoline and Mr. Jack if I could go with Christine and her mother.
Well, every girl should do something special for her sweet 16. But you must make sure that the kitchen is cleaned from top to bottom before Christine's mom picks you up.
The next day, I gave Christine the good news and she handed me a bag.
Saturday, we'll all be wearing matching outfits.
I couldn't wait for Saturday. I couldn't believe that I'd finally have a birthday worth remembering. And boy, was it a birthday to remember. Saturday, I woke up at the crack of dawn and got to work. I cleaned the cupboards, the fridge, the stove, and the oven, inside out and top to bottom. Around 12 o'clock, I completed my tasks. The kitchen was spotless. Christine and her mother were to arrive in 30 minutes. I dashed to my bedroom and laid out my clothes before I showered quickly, excited about the afternoon ahead. After showering, I entered my bedroom. My outfit was gone. I looked everywhere. Then it dawned on me. Mel probably took it. I inhaled deeply. I wasn't about to let Mel ruin my perfect day. I quickly found something else and got dressed. I entered the living room where Miss Nicoline sat.
Did you clean the kitchen?
Yes, Miss Nicoline.
Okay, let's have a look then.
Miss Nicoline followed me to the kitchen. I pushed open the door and my heart dropped. The kitchen looked like a food bomb exploded. Chocolate syrup was squirted all over the kitchen cupboards. Ketchup and mustard decorated the walls. Honey was smeared over the appliances. There was even ice cream dripping from the ceiling.
What in the world?
Miss Nicoline whispered. I cleaned the kitchen just as you asked. I don't understand how this happened.
This kitchen is a disaster. You can't go anywhere until this is cleaned up.
Just then, Mel walked into the kitchen.
Hi, Mom.
I glared at her. She wore the outfit that Christine's mom bought for me. It was you! My blood boiled. I was sick and tired of Mel and her parents. I felt the steam coming from my ears as I charged at her.
Get off her, you animal!
Miss Nicolene dragged me off Mel. My breath was rugged and my fists were still clenched. With tears in my eyes, I ran to my room, slammed the door shut, locked it, and fell onto my bed. When the doorbell rang, I peeked out my window and saw Christine's mother's car. After a few minutes, I saw Christine and her mom jump into the car and they drove away. Something needed to be done. I refused to live like a caged rat. It was time I stood up for myself. I marched downstairs to demand better treatment when midway, I heard the doorbell ring and a male voice asked for Miss Trisha Alawo.
I'm sorry, but no one lives here by that name.
Miss Nicolene responded. As I was about to take another step, Mr. Jack appeared at the staircase.
Where do you think you're going?
Before I knew what was happening, Mr. Jack covered my mouth with his hand and he dragged me back to my room. He pushed me into my room. I heard it lock from the other side. I looked outside where 6 older men stood, all of whom wore the same type of hat. Why would Miss Nicolene say they didn't know who I was? Did they know the men? How did the men know me? I slammed my hands against the window to get their attention, but I was too high for them to see. If these people knew who I was, does it mean they knew who my parents were? Did they know my family? This was the opportunity I needed to leave this house once and for all, and I wasn't going to let it go to waste. I took the chair from my desk and smashed it against the window repeatedly until the window hung from the frame. I yanked it out and threw it on one side of the room. Mr. Jack appeared in the doorway.
What are you doing, you little brat?
I scrambled out of the window before Mr. Jack could grab hold of my leg and pull me back into the room. Fire! Fire! Someone please help me! I screamed as I gingerly crossed the roof. If I could get to the tree on the other end, I'd be able to climb down to safety. My screams alerted only the men, but a few neighbors came out of their homes to see what was going on. I was almost to the tree when I heard a sickening creak beneath me. I fell through the roof and hit the floor with a thud. My body flinched with pain. I struggled to keep my eyes open. Everything went black. I opened my eyes groggily. The beeping of the machines in the room made my head throb. As my eyes adjusted to the bright lights, it roamed the room. 2 of the gentlemen were seated in the room. Both men stood up and bowed.
Your Majesty.
One stepped forward.
We are happy that you are finally awake.
What do you mean, finally awake? I asked weakly.
You have been asleep for 3 days, Your Majesty.
3 days? Who are you?
We are the kinsmen of your parents' village. I am Charles and his name is Augustus. We have come to take you home. Sadly, our last king died, and we need someone of royal blood to be crowned.
I laughed even though it hurt. This has to be a dream. I closed my eyes and opened them.
I can assure you, Your Majesty, you are very much awake,
Charles said. The door opened and Mr. Lane and a doctor walked into the room.
Hi, Tricia. How are you feeling?
Mr. Lane asked in a concerned voice. Well, I'm alive. Everything hurts.
Hi, Tricia. I'm Dr. McLean. You'll have to stay in hospital for a few days under observation. Luckily, you didn't get broken bones. However, your muscles do have some scarring. A nurse will come in shortly to give you something for the pain.
Dr. McLean walked out of the room. Mr. Lane continued.
Are you and your uncles getting along okay?
Uncles?
Yes, uncles. We took DNA samples, and these 2 men are your family. We have already checked out their story, but it's up to you if you want to go with them or go to another family.
I'll take my chance with my family since me being here is a consequence of the family you put me with, I said dryly. Mr. Lane's face turned red.
I'll just leave it to you then.
Mr. Lane walked out of the room. While at the hospital, I learned that my parents ran away from home and moved to another country because they wanted to live life on their own terms. By the time they were found, my parents had already died in a car accident and I was lost within the system. Later, I was introduced to David, Edmund, Alfonso, and Frederick. A week later, I was discharged from the hospital. I visited Christine and her mom and told them what happened.
I'm so happy for you. We had no idea what happened to you. I hope Mom and I can come visit. You'll make an amazing queen.
Shortly after I visited Christine's, I was on a flight to my ancestral home. Upon arrival, I was shown the sights of the city. I was excited to start a new life. As we made our way back to the palace along the lonely road, a black panel van ran us off the road. 2 masked people jumped out of the van and yanked the car door open. They dragged us out of the car.
Lay on the ground and do as we say, and no one has to get hurt.
The elders obeyed, and I was tossed into the van before it sped off. In the van, I was gagged, a black sack was placed over my head, and my hands and legs were bound. After driving around for a while, the van stopped. I heard the door open, and I was thrown over someone's shoulders like a sack of flour. When I was finally untied and ungagged, I was thrown into a small room with a bed. "Why am I here? What do you want?" I yelled.
Don't worry, this will be over soon. If you're not crowned in 1 week, the crown goes to another royal family. As soon as the other family is crowned, you will be released.
The man slammed the door and left me alone in the room. Over the next few days, I stayed close to the door and heard tidbits of information.
Who is she to be queen? Her parents abandoned their people. It's time for another family to rule the kingdom.
I knew that voice. It was Edmund. Late one night, I was shaken awake. Augustus whispered,
Your Majesty, we need to leave this place now.
He grabbed my hand as we snuck out of the building. As we exited the building, we ran a few meters where a car waited for us. We hopped in and the car drove off. I squeezed Augustus's hand and whispered, "Thank you."
No problem, Your Majesty. You are safe now.
Once at the palace, I was heavily guarded. There were 50 hours till my coronation. The next day, I called Charles and Augustus to my room for a private meeting. I told them what I overheard while I was held captive. Both men assured me that they will get to the bottom of it. About 5 hours before my coronation, the 6 elders appeared before me with Mel. I looked at the men. Why is she here?
This is Edmund's niece, Your Majesty.
Charles pushed Edmund towards me and he fell to the floor in front of me.
After his sister died in childbirth, he sent his niece away. He has been paying the Frasers to take care of her.
Did you also pay them to ill-treat me? I asked Edmund.
No, Your Majesty. The Frasers told me they had another girl with them, but I didn't know it was you.
Edmund said nervously, his eyes fixed on the floor. I looked at Charles and Augustus. Is he the only traitor? Charles pushed Alfonso and Frederick before me.
These 2 men also worked with Edmund to bring about your demise.
Thank you, Charles and Augustus, for your loyalty. You and your family will be well rewarded. Get them out of here. If they ever set foot in this country again, the penalty is death. The day of my coronation passed and everything went well. I didn't add any more elders to guide me on my journey as queen. I trusted David, Charles, and Augustus with everything I had. I also opened up 3 orphanages within the country and helped to refurbish and renovate the 4 that were already established, to give other children a chance at a better future. If you became a queen or a king, what would your first order of business be?
I couldn't believe my luck. I was so excited. Who knew I could make dye from plants? Definitely not me. I mixed the dyes in a twirly circle inside the water so it could create a magnificent design once it came out. I put in 5 of my gowns and smiled at the result after bringing it out of the colored water. I hung the clothes outside and proceeded to prepare the remaining dishes for the day. 2 hours later, I brought in my new multicolored gowns. They were completely dry. I started cutting them with scissors to create different designs on them. I was extremely excited. I was doing what no one else had ever thought of doing. The next day, I got ready, trying my best to look as beautiful as possible. Then I walked straight into the dining section with my beautiful, multicolored gown. Unfortunately, the reaction I got from my parents was the exact opposite of what I was expecting. They looked like they'd just seen a ghost that they wanted to kill. Like and subscribe to find out why.
What are you wearing, Michelle?
A gown?
What do you think you're doing? Do you want us to get into trouble? Take it off immediately.
But Mom, Dad, why are you guys being so harsh? I really thought you'd like them.
Them? Just exactly how many clothes did you do this to?
Just 5 of my gowns, Mom.
Just 5? How many gowns do you have in total?
I pretended to count with my fingers. 6 gowns, Mom.
And you dyed just 5?
Mom just kept scolding me while my dad put his face in his hands, shaking his head in fear and disappointment. When he was done, he finally spoke again.
Sweetheart, that's enough. Michelle didn't know she was making a mistake. Now that you know, Michelle,
He turned to me.
never repeat this no matter what. You are not allowed to break the rules. Unmarried ladies only wear white gowns in our village, while the married ones wear black. You can't wear anything else.
I know what I'm supposed to wear, Dad. I just thought I could try something different for once.
No, honey, you can't.
I ran back to my room in tears. As I was leaving, I heard my mom mumble,
"This is terrible. Now we have to buy new gowns for her. I hope we can afford it."
She'll have to manage the single one she has for a short while, since she's purposely destroyed 5 of them.
"Stupid village!" I screamed as I banged my door. I hated my village. The rules were just too much. Unmarried ladies had to wear white gowns, married ladies wore black, while all men, both married and unmarried, wore black clothes. I hated the white gowns, so I just wanted to do something different. I thought my parents would be pleasantly surprised at this innovation, but instead, they were just disappointed. Our village was practically hidden from the rest of the world. Most of the villagers were born here and had never stepped out of the village before, myself included. This was mostly because everyone in the village believed that the world outside was extremely bad and corrupt, thanks to the teachings of our elders and their ancestors. We had rules governing how everyone should look, from our clothes to our hair to our shoes, our houses, our partners, and everything else. I hated these rules so much. I just wanted to be free. I always asked questions about the outside world, but people kept shushing me, telling me that it was forbidden to talk of such evil. I wanted to know if they lived the same way we did, with harsh rules governing every single step they ever took.
Snap out of it, Michelle. We have a lot of work to do.
My teacher, the healer, snapped. I had changed into my last surviving big white gown and quickly left for our healing temple to work and learn, without telling my parents goodbye. I wasn't in the mood to talk to them at that time. "Yes, ma'am," I replied as I sanitized my body and started tending to the sick. People had been dying uncontrollably in our village recently. It was due to the outbreak of an unknown virus which we didn't seem to have a cure for. We all knew that any one of us could be next, especially the old ones, so everyone was prepared. My parents had tried to convince me to stop working with the healer, but I assured them that I was properly sanitized myself before and after operations, and I also wore our local protective gear when working to prevent me from catching any disease. After work that day, I returned home and quickly washed my gown so it'd be dry before morning, since I had to wear it again the next day. I got up bright and early the next morning and proceeded to the healing temple once again. As I got to the door, I overheard my teacher, the healer, arguing with the village grand leader and urging him to go to the bad world to get medicine and save his people, but he refused, saying that it was forbidden. They argued for a long time, but he said that perhaps the gods were punishing them for something they did, so they had to take responsibility. I couldn't believe that there was actually a way to save the villagers from dying, and our village grand leader simply refused to take it. I decided to take matters into my own hands, so I tiptoed into the temple and stole the list of required medicines from a table. Then I proceeded to escape my village for the very first time in my life. I climbed the fence and jumped over it, scratching my leg in the process. While walking through the forest, dazed and confused at just how big the world outside my village was, I suddenly heard a roar. My legs froze, and I turned to look back. Behind me, there was a huge lion. My feet quickly sprung into action and I started running as fast as I could. This was a race for life. I couldn't stop until I was safe. I think it was a race for the life for the lion, too. It looked thin and like it would probably die if it didn't eat me. Well, I couldn't think about that now. I wasn't going to be selfless enough to offer myself up as a meal to the lion. A whole village was counting on me to save their lives, even if they didn't know it yet. As I ran the race of life, I suddenly slipped and fell into a deep hole. I tried to move inside the hole, but it was slippery, and I ended up slipping again. But this time, I hit my head badly and passed out. As I drifted out of consciousness, I saw the lion looking down at me from above the cage with victory in its eyes. I'd just given it a free meal. I opened my eyes and found myself in a cabin. An old man was tending to my head wound. As I looked at him closely, I immediately realized who he was. "Master Jumpa!" I squealed. "What are you doing here? Everyone thinks you're dead. We held a burial ceremony for you in the village." Master Jumpa was the previous village healer. I learned under him for a short while until he was suddenly proclaimed dead by the village Grand Master, and a burial ceremony was conducted for him. After that event, I began working with the new healer, who was an older student to Master Jumpa. He gave a weak laugh.
I didn't die, Michelle. I just did what I thought was the right thing. My patients were dying from a virus like mosquitoes. and the Grand Master refused to help. I couldn't stand by and watch them anymore, so I took a huge step. I escaped the village and went to the real world to get the medicine that could cure them.
You mean the bad world?
Whatever you fanatics call it.
Oh my god, that was 5 years ago. You've been living here for 5 years? But why are you living in the forest? Why didn't you stay in the bad world or go home?
My people refused to accept me when I returned. They said I was tainted and the bad world was too scary for me. I'm a 45-year-old man. I've lived my whole life in the village. How could I adjust? But I look on the bright side. Maybe I was put here to help save you from that lion.
We both smiled. Master Jumpa, I think there's been another outbreak of the same virus you cured 5 years ago. The villagers are dying, and as a matter of fact, that is why I'm here. I came to get medicine to help.
Well, lucky you. I know exactly where you can find those. I can help you get them because you're wounded, and I wouldn't want you to run into more danger. But you have to promise me one thing.
What's that?
You have to promise to stay put in the cabin. I don't want you to rip your stitches.
I promise. He nodded and smiled, then packed a little supply bag before leaving the house. I stayed put, but only moved when I got hungry and had to get food from the kitchen. It was night when he returned with the medicine. I was very happy and ready to leave, but he told me to wait till morning. Morning came shortly and he walked me to a near distance before stopping and saying that he couldn't go further. I hugged him and ran to the village. To my surprise, I was stopped at the gate and not let in. The Grand Master arrived with my parents and the healer and said that I had contacted evil from the bad world and I was no longer welcome in the village. I pleaded for mercy from them, but they all ignored me. Even my parents simply shook their heads and left with tears in their eyes. When it was just the healer left, she sneaked the medicine away from me and said,
Thank you so much for saving our lives. I'm sorry that I can't help you this time, but take this. This is all I can offer you. Goodbye.
She quickly ran away, and as I wiped the tears from my eyes, I looked at the weird paper she had squeezed into my hand. It looked like some kind of money, but it wasn't what we used in the village. I kept it safe nevertheless. I cried as I walked back to Master Jumpa's cabin, but I met him on the road, waiting for me. You knew they wouldn't let me in?
I'm sorry, Michelle.
We went back to the cabin and started living there. A few days passed and I told Master Jumpa about all my dreams. I also told him how I discovered dye and how I kept on discovering new medicine for the healing temple by mixing several plants together. He said I had a talent and that we would move to the outside world together so we could build on it. On the day of our departure, Mistress Helen, the healer I'd been working under, suddenly burst into the cabin breathing heavily.
Where are you guys off to? Can I come with?
Why are you here, Helen?
Master Jumpa, oh my god, you're fine. I'm so happy. I was thrown out of the village because of this medicine I took for Michelle. The virus is under control now, though. Everyone is recovering.
That's great news! I screamed. Master Jumpa simply shook his head and told Mistress Helen that she could follow us. We moved into a city together, and Mistress Helen paid for a year's worth of rent with the money she had given me, and some more which she came with. She refused to tell us how she came across the money. We all started doing odd jobs so we could survive, and everything went quite well until one day. I was cleaning the hall where a group of really messy students were gathered. I was cleaning up after them when I noticed that they were still trying to solve the same simple math problem they'd been trying to solve yesterday. Annoyed, I walked to the board, solved the problem, and started getting ready to go home. But two men suddenly approached and stopped me.
How did you do that? We've been trying to solve this for years, and we've just recently brought it to the brightest children in the country, but still, no one could solve it. And you just walked up here and solved it in seconds.
It wasn't hard at all. The two men looked at each other, scaring me. After a lot of back and forth, I was awarded a scholarship that was supposed to take care of my studies throughout high school and college. While I was schooling, Master Jumpa and Mistress Helen somehow fell in love with each other and got married. After that, they legally adopted me as their own daughter. While studying, I worked as an intern at one of the most famous companies in the country. They paid me a salary that was more than enough for me and my family to live on, so things quickly got better. Once our rent expired, we moved into a more comfortable house and got home equipment that made life more tolerable. My new parents got jobs as nurses, using their healing skills, and they proceeded to also open their own shop. where they sold both local, herbal, and modern medicines. People patronized them very well because they were fascinated with their products. I graduated successfully as one of the greatest minds in my industry, and the company where I'd been previously working at as an intern gave me a job immediately after I graduated. With our newfound lives and happiness, our lives quickly went from bad to tolerable, then amazing. We forgot about the deranged village we came from, and the even more deranged people that occupied it. 1 year after Master Jumpa and Mistress Helen got married, Mistress Helen got pregnant and gave birth to twins, 1 boy and 1 girl. We gave them the lives that we couldn't have ever even dreamt of having when we were younger, and we all lived happily ever after. If you enjoyed my story, please hit the like and subscribe button. It really helps our channel out. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Sylvia, oh my god, you're so pretty. Yeah, your hair is so perfect. And your skin, how is it so smooth? You've gotta share your skincare routine with me.
I was used to everyone making a fuss over me, and when I ran into those freshman girls at my high school that morning, I wasn't surprised. Everyone either knew me or knew about me. And one thing that was for sure was that everyone wanted to be me. For me, this popularity was like food. I didn't know how I'd live without people constantly telling me how beautiful and perfect I was. Then something so awful that I never imagined possible happened, and it changed my life forever. Keep watching if you want to find out what that was. Before school started that morning, I was sitting outside on a bench under my favorite tree. 2 guys were trying to make small talk with me about something dumb, and I was thinking like, whatever, this is normal, they're all obsessed. Then they turned away from me, and I noticed that everyone around was staring in one direction. I looked, and there she was, exiting the latest Lamborghini in the most fashionable clothes I'd ever seen anyone wearing at school. She looked like an upgraded version of me and was developed in all the right places. For the first time in my life, I felt jealous of another girl. Like, really jealous. I was literally boiling inside. As she walked up the steps to enter the hallway, it was like everyone stopped talking or doing anything, just to stare at her. No one paid any attention to me at all. I went to my first class and looked for my boyfriend Jimmy. Silly name. Yeah, I know. But he was hot, so it didn't matter. He was already there, so I went to sit next to him. He whispered sweet nothings into my ear that made me feel better for a while, but then she walked in. What the hell? I thought. How can she be in my class? Jimmy looked away from me and stared at her like she was an angel. I pinched his arm so he could snap back to reality and gave him a really mean look. A few seconds later, our teacher walked in and took her place at the front of the class.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to introduce you to your new classmate, Isabella. She just moved here from Switzerland. Please give her a warm welcome.
Hi everyone, I'm so happy to meet you all.
Everyone smiled at her, and I wanted to throw up. There was no way I could compare with curves like that. I was the queen here, and she was trying to change that. That afternoon, I went home depressed. I sat on my bed and scrolled through TikTok because that always cheered me up. But eventually, I got bored with that, and just as I was about to put the phone away, an ad popped up, and I was hooked from the first line.
Are you feeling down because you don't have the most beautiful body in existence? Well, frown no more because we can help you to achieve perfection. In fact, we guarantee it. With just 1 pill a day for 3 months, we can transform you from basic to spectacular. It sounds too good to be true, but it isn't. Listen to all these awesome testimonials.
I watched the testimonials and saw pictures of women who looked horrible in comparison to me, transformed into total babes. I was instantly persuaded, so I went to my dad's office, took his credit card, and ordered lots of pills. The next day, I went to school feeling a bit more confident. My order was going to arrive that evening, so I had nothing to worry about. But when I got into my classroom, I saw Isabella sitting on Jimmy's lap laughing, probably at one of his stupid jokes. I grabbed the first thing I found, which just happened to be a whiteboard marker, and threw it at them. What the hell do you think you're doing? Get off my boyfriend!
Chill, she isn't doing anything wrong. You don't have to get up, baby. Stay right where you are.
Isabella just looked at us and smiled. What an idiot. Jimmy, I can't believe you. Well, if you're going to be this comfortable with any girl, then you can consider this relationship over.
Cool. Isabella, you single?
He smiled at her and I couldn't believe it. It was her second day, and she'd already stolen my boyfriend. The rest of my day was also awful. Everyone focused on Isabella and ignored me. I felt so relieved when I got home and found my package in front of my doorstep. I picked it up and went straight to the kitchen to get a glass of water. I took the first pill, then went to work on some homework. The next morning, I got up feeling confident. I went downstairs to have breakfast with my family. I sat down, and my mom brought a jug of orange juice to the table, but suddenly, she stared at me as if she'd never been so scared in her entire life and dropped the juice all over the floor.
What happened to you?
What, Mom?
Look at your hands.
I looked at my hands and screamed. I had 3 extra fingers on each hand. Mom, I honestly have no idea how this happened. Please don't make me go to school today. I can't be seen like this.
I have to take you to the hospital.
No, Mom. It will be okay tomorrow. The rest of my family was too shocked to say anything. My dad was frozen. I went to my room trembling. I picked up the box of pills and called the number provided on the back.
Perfect Body Pills customer service. How can we help you?
I woke up with 6 extra fingers. You didn't inform me of these side effects.
You didn't read the fine print.
What fine print?
It's going to get worse before it gets better. Your body is simply adjusting to the chemicals in the pills. A few awkward things will happen, but don't worry. At the end of the 3-month period, you will be perfect. But
what?
if you stop taking them before the 3 months are over, whatever deformity you have at the time will remain permanent. So if you don't take the pill tonight, you're going to have 16 fingers forever.
This is crazy! I screamed and hung up. I mean, what else was there to do? I locked myself in my room all day. Jimmy didn't even try to call to ask why I wasn't at school. I guess he was too preoccupied with that stupid Isabella. That night, I took my pill, and the next morning I woke up and breathed a sigh of relief. My hands were back to normal. But then I went to the bathroom mirror to brush my teeth and screamed. My nose hairs were so long they reached my lips. After freaking out for a little while, I got some scissors and cut them off. Phew, at least this one has an easy solution, I thought. I got ready for school and sped out the door. The first week was weird, but I eventually got used to waking up with a new problem every day. One morning I woke up and one butt cheek was bigger than the other. And the next day, one leg was bigger than the other. Oh my gosh. And then I had red bumps all over my body, and my face was swollen. I kept reminding myself that it was all for a worthy cause, and that this wasn't going to last forever. I just had to find creative ways to cover up. Then when I had about a month left to go before I could finish the pills, I thought of a really evil plan. My mom had made some of her awesome chocolate cake, which Jimmy loved to eat whenever he came over. I cut a big slice and hid one of the pills in the icing. When I got to school, I found Jimmy and told him I needed to speak to him urgently. He wasn't too happy about it, but I pulled him into the janitor's closet. Hey, I'm sorry about everything that happened between us. Here, I brought you some of my mom's chocolate cake. I hope you enjoy it, and even though we aren't together anymore, I wish you the best. He smiled, grabbed the cake, winked, and left. I couldn't wait to see what irreversible, horrible thing would happen to him. It was my best day since Isabella came and ruined everything. I smiled all day and went home smiling. In fact, I almost forgot to take my pill because I was so happy. The next morning, I woke up with no eyelashes and sighed. I put on a hat that was long enough to cover it, and I went to school. I looked around for Jimmy all day, but he wasn't there. For once, I approached Isabella with a smile. Hey, I noticed that Jimmy isn't here. Is he okay?
Well, he told me he wasn't feeling well this morning. Do you want to have lunch together? I hate that we started off on bad terms.
Sure. I smiled deceptively. I know. It sounds weird, but I had another plan which involved getting Isabella to trust me a bit. When we finished our lunch, we had already managed to exchange numbers and social media handles. After school, I went to Jimmy's house pretending to be concerned about his illness. When I got there, his mom let me come in. I guess she didn't know that we'd already broken up. I went up to his room and opened the door without knocking.
What are you doing here?
He tried frantically to cover his head, but it was too late. I'd already seen it. He was bald. So you're not sick. You're just bald?
Please don't tell anyone about this.
I'll think about it. I winked and left. This was just perfect. Jimmy was conceited, and he was especially proud of his hair. He didn't come to school for a whole week, and during that time, I got Isabella to trust me more. Then do you know what I did? I gave her some of my mom's chocolate cake, of course. She gobbled it down in 3 seconds. The next day, she didn't show up at school, so I called her.
Sylvia, I woke up and you won't believe what happened to me overnight.
What happened?
All my curves are gone. I am totally flat now.
It worked!
What?
Nothing. That's sad, Isabella, but I'm sure you'll be okay soon. I hung up and felt very satisfied with myself. To make things better, it was the last day of my 3 months, and the next day I was supposed to wake up perfect. Well, that day came, and do you know what? I went to the mirror, looked myself up and down, all around, and realized that this is exactly how I looked before I started the pills. I decided that I was perfect just as I was, and that I didn't need to take anything to change that. There'll always be people who look better or worse, and I guess we just have to be content just the way we are. I'm still laughing at Jimmy and Isabella now, though. They make the most awkward couple ever because they look funny, and now I'm back to being the hottest person at school. 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 School.